Welcome to Wager Talk TV. Kelly Stewart here, Kelly in Vegas. Of course, I got the purple jacket on because we are talking Big 12 Conference. Bringing in Adam Trigger and Chris Thurston, CT Bets, as you guys also know him. I'm going to host this one, even though Adam's been doing a wonderful job hosting all of these conference championship games. And that means we're skipping past the first four games. These games that start tomorrow at 12, basically 12:30 Eastern. And the reason why is because I don't want them to become irrelevant, and not a single one of those four teams are going to win it. Oklahoma State, UCF, West Virginia, or Cincinnati, they're not winning the Big 12 tournament. So we're going to go right into the Wednesday games. Before we get started with the games, CT Bets, your thoughts on the Big 12 tournament, Baylor alum?
Well, you and I get the most excited for this one. Not only is this the most competitive conference going on right now, it's the best conference in college basketball. So I think this one's always the best one. I know we're a little bit biased, but they have the best teams. And Kel, right now, the top 9 seeds are projected to get in here. So what does that tell you? This is going to be a great tournament here. It's a little different than the years past, right? Because Kansas is not the Kansas we're used to seeing. They're very hurt. And Iowa State came in second place in the regular season in the Big 12, something we're not used to seeing. And Houston wins it in their first ever season of the Big 12. I think that we're fit for a lot of fireworks this week in the Big 12, and it should be a really great tournament.
Yeah, I think you're right, CT. We do know top to bottom. That is not a undeniable fact. They will get 9 teams in, and as they should. I'm excited to see some additions over the next couple of years because this will be a basketball powerhouse. Trig, your thoughts right now? Houston is the odds-on favorite. But they're basically already slotted to be a 1 seed, correct? They're already in. They're a shoe-in. They don't have a reason other than bragging rights to win this. CT touched on Iowa State being a very good team this year, but not necessarily away from Hilton Arena. Baylor, a lot of really popular bets coming in on Baylor. I joined our good friend BP on them to win this one, 8-1. I actually got plus 750, and it's now even 7-1 on a lot of spots. Give me a 45-second quick overview on your thoughts on the tournament as a whole.
Well, just some quick numbers to back up what CT was saying. All 12 teams outside of Oklahoma State and West Virginia are in the top 70 in KenPom adjusted defensive efficiency. 10 of the 14 are in the top 80 in offensive efficiency, and all 12 other than Oklahoma State and West Virginia are in the top 32 in KenPom in one or the other. That's insane. So I agree with you. I'm throwing out Oklahoma State and West Virginia. As far as Houston's concerned, Kelly, I don't know why anyone in their right mind would take Houston minus 135 to win this tournament. And it's not just because of like, oh, well, do they care? Do they not care? CT and I got to watch Houston in person. There's still something lacking with Houston offensively. I know their defense is fantastic. I know they're efficient, but at some point in 3 days, playing 3 games in 3 days, that offense is going to slip up a little bit. And one of these other teams that are very, very efficient offenses is going to get them. I'm just not sure who it is, but I would not be laying it with the favorite in this tournament.
As you guys can tell on the brackets, the number 5 seed BYU will be getting a bye. The number 6 seed Kansas will be getting a bye. Wednesday, Oklahoma 9 seed plays TCU 8 seed. Let's get into this one, and then we'll get into K-State, Texas. CT, got a text today. Porter Moser is going to be the new head coach of DePaul. Do you think that affects the Sooners' chances of winning this game? It appears, according to bracketology, that both teams should be getting into the big dance.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got the same text that you did. I'm not sure what to think of that. Even with that news, I like TCU in this game. I'm not sure what KenPom makes it. Obviously, the line isn't out yet. But Cal, Oklahoma is only as good as the Siena transfer, Javion McCullum, takes them, and he hasn't been able to do everything himself. He hasn't been getting much help on the offensive side of the ball. They've been pretty decent defensively. Haven't really impressed me. They had a really tough February there. I like TCU. They're a very veteran team. They play well together. They're pretty good on the defensive and offensive side of the ball. Better coach as well, in my opinion here. I like TCU to get the job done over OU.
I would have to slightly lean in that direction as well. Trig, kind of looking over at Ken Palm in the way this game breaks it down. He makes the game one. I think TCU is going to continue getting bet up. It looks like the more popular side, and that's because what we've seen from Jamie Dixon's team is a lot more, well, I won't call it consistent, but they don't turn the ball over like Oklahoma does. Oklahoma is a rather frustrating team, but they can defend the three ball really well. What are your thoughts here on this matchup? First one, tipping off, let's look, 2 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see the matchup similar to you. I noticed that with TCU, when you look at, in the context of the Big 12 3-point percentage, they led the Big 12, in Big 12 games in 3, but Oklahoma State does defend it well. I do think that matters a little bit. I mean, it's not like Porter Moser, this doesn't feel like a spot where he should be moving on, right? Like he just got there a couple of years ago, and I would be willing to fade that with Oklahoma. That just doesn't seem like a good situation right there. And you talk about two teams where the margin's very thin, neutral court. TCU, like both these teams still got to be thinking in the back of their head, like we need this one, and we're safe, right? Like that's got to be the thought process here. So I don't like that as far as that being announced before this tournament. And I have noticed the same thing as Chris. J.V. McCollum's being asked to do an awful lot. TCU just seems like the more complete team right now, and I think they probably sneak by Oklahoma in this one.
I would agree with both of you. We'll see if I actually end up getting to the window with that one. Another matchup here that I think is going to be rather interesting. Texas probably going to be about a 4.5 point favorite here to my Kansas State Wildcats. K-State off a huge win at home against Iowa State, and not huge by a margin wise, but huge in terms of needing that win. And they need probably at least 2, if not 3 wins in the Big 12 tournament to get into the big dance. I mentioned the turnover woes for the Sooners. My goodness, does Kansas State turn the ball over, almost worse than any other team in the country. The other thing is they cannot knock down threes. Tyler Perry's been in a little bit of a funk, been getting double teamed a lot. Cam Carter was almost non-existent in that game. Thank God for David Gasson and Arthur Kaluma stepping up big. Data Ames, true freshman, came to play as well as Will McNair in that one. Chris, here's the problem I have with Texas. I actually took Oklahoma on Saturday. I said, Oklahoma, not good as a home favorite. They win games, but they don't cover. There was never really in doubt. Texas kind of ran away with that one. But again, now that we know some of the troubles, if you will, in Norman regarding their head coach, maybe that was something brewing in the mix there. Your thoughts on Rodney Terry's team and my Kansas State Wildcats?
Yeah, this past Saturday, Texas was a pretty big bet for me, and I think that Texas was probably the second best team in the conference in the month of February. I thought they played great. You look at this team on paper and the amount of talent that they have, you're like, what the heck was Terry doing? This is a team that made a deep run last year. They have almost everyone back, and their backcourt's great, right? Max Abmas, when he's making shots from beyond the arc, holy shit, look out. They could beat anybody. Not to mention he has Tyrese Hunter as his counterpart there. I think Texas is worth a shot here. Worth a look, 30-1. I know they have to play an extra day because they only got one bye here, but they have 5 seniors, big shot makers. They've been there before. I don't think Rodney Terry's the answer for Texas as a coach. But they got all the talent in the world here. I think your Wildcats are going to be one and done in the Big 12 tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah, they would. The winner of that game would play Iowa State. It's going to be interesting. If Texas can learn how to defend the 3 ball here late in March, I kind of agree with you. They could be sneaky good. Trig, do I have any hope on winning at least one game in the Big 12 tournament? Or did K-State blow their load against Iowa State and that's it? One and done, TT says. One and done.
That was Saturday. They've had time, to read since then. But here's the thing with this matchup. Jerome Tang's a much better coach than Rodney Terry. So you got that going
Okay.
for you.
Yes,
Like,
there's one good thing we can say.
For sure.
I try, and here's the one thing about Tang that I really like, and I think that doesn't really show up in the overall metrics. I like Tang in a tournament setting. I feel like he just knows how to sort of get his guys like motivated, get them rallied. We saw it in the NCAA tournament last year. We saw it when we were in the Bahamas and the way they kind of came out with energy against Providence, knowing they were undermanned, right? Like they still, I think Tang and his ability to motivate goes a long way in this type of setting. The other thing I like about Kansas State, defensive efficiency, they're 20th in the Big 10 or Big 12. I'm sorry, that's still a very solid, but like their defense has been far and away like better than I could have ever expected, and it's really kept them in a lot of games. You also have to like Tyler Perry for just being clutch, even though he's been a little bit cold lately. See, but I don't disagree with Chris, and this is where you have to like separate the two when you're talking about like handicapping a one-off game in the tournament or taking a shot on a team that you think is a good value to win. I don't mind his play on Texas at that price. Texas, they're a top 20 offensive efficiency team. I really think in this tournament, you're going to need a team. Like, I don't think a team's going to win this with defense. And I don't think that's going to be a case in a lot of these conference tournaments. You need, a team that can really score, because that's going to probably carry you over the course of 3 days. It's why I don't really think Iowa State wins this tournament, which I guess we'll get into in a second. So I don't hate his Texas look, but at the same time, I don't think it's far-fetched to think Kansas State might win this game, just for the sheer fact that I think Tang can outcoach Terry in a one-off situation.
That's actually the only thing that I would have any solace in taking the Wildcats would be the coaching factor here, especially, if that game were to go to a little overtime. Let's take a look at the bracket again. Pull it up here on the screen. We've got 2 byes, as I mentioned, for a couple of these teams. That would be 1 bye for BYU. They play the winner of Oklahoma State UCF. And Kansas, they play the winner of West Virginia Cincinnati. Obviously, we have to wait for those games to come out. But we're going to go ahead and assume Kansas will be a double-digit favorite or very close to that over West Virginia or Cincinnati. BYU probably very similar over UCF or Oklahoma State. CT, do you have any comments on either of those games?
Not really. I kind of like you kind of touched at the beginning of the show. I mean, I don't think either of those teams have a shot here to make a deep run. I think whoever wins those games is probably going to get knocked out the next round, whether that's by BYU or Kansas on the other side of the bracket there. I liked Central Florida when it opened today at 3, or I know it's like 4 now, but no real opinion on either one of those games, Cal.
So you do think they will be the team to advance to play BYU? Do you think they have a shot versus BYU if they were to win on Tuesday?
I don't. I like BYU. I know that they got the firepower from beyond the arc there, and I know they blew a huge lead versus Iowa State this past week, and they looked really good in the first half there. I know that was on the road, but man, they went cold in the second half. I haven't really seen that BYU team kind of just go so cold like that all year long. I think they got a lot of the pieces to make a deep run here, because kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the tournament, not really sure how motivated Houston is going to be, especially with they're such short bench right now. They're a little dinged up. I think BYU could make a little run on that side of the bracket.
Ooh, BYU has been kind of, well, I'll call them, for lack of better words, a surprise, but maybe it's because I wasn't really familiar with their game outside of seeing them here and there every once in a while in Las Vegas. Let's go to the bottom part of the bracket. Probably going to be Cincinnati, Trig, that faces the University of Kansas. As CT had already mentioned, KU's banged up right now. Hunter Dickinson's hurt. As of most recently, McCullers been banged up. Your thoughts on Kansas? Obviously, probably going to get the win here, but then they would go to face Baylor.
I don't think it's a given that Kansas beats Cincinnati if that's the matchup. And I would be willing to fade Kansas in this tournament. They're the kind of team, like, I haven't been impressed with their offense this year. Like, I think they move the ball well, and they do hit a high percentage of their shots, but They don't get to the rim as good as I would expect a Kansas team to. And the reason I talk about, I think Cincinnati might be live in that matchup. They played once during the regular season. It was at Allen Fieldhouse. I had Cincinnati in that game. I think I was a little bit fortunate to cover. But, Cincinnati went 3 for 18 from 3. They couldn't really buy a shot yet. Totally out-rebounded Kansas, managed to stay in the game, and turn the ball over a ton. Like, if you go back to that matchup and Cincinnati were to clean things up a little bit, they would absolutely be right in there, in a game with Kansas. Now, I just think Kansas from I'm not saying from a game-to-game perspective that they won't be a potentially a good bet at some point, but this is the type of team where I just don't trust their offense enough over the course of 3 days. And with the way Baylor's been making adjustments, Baylor's been really impressive in the respect that, like, they can fall behind, and it just seems like Scott Drew makes the adjustment, comes out of half. We've been kind of talking about Baylor in the second half for a couple of weeks now. That's the type of profile I prefer to bet on in the tournament like this, not a Kansas team that I think could go cold at some point and cost himself a game.
No, absolutely. I was kicking myself after I laid it with Texas Tech on Saturday. I did not bet Baylor second half. Keep an eye on Baylor, one of the best second half teams, not only in the Big 12, but in the country. Let's go to the top of said bracket. And as I mentioned, probably going to be BYU, Texas Tech. And the other two games I do think are a coin flip there in the middle. Chris, any kind of, we won't call them final thoughts just yet, but any thoughts there? Game 3, maybe even potentially teams that you think are going to make it to the semifinals.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip up top there. I'll leave that for you and Treg. I'll go right back down to the bottom of the bracket here. So I think it's going to be Baylor versus Texas in the semifinals. And I really like Baylor here. Brian Power texted me last night when I was on the way home from the gym, and he said, hey, what do you think about Baylor winning the Big 12 tournament? And I said, have the odds come out yet? He said 8-1. I said, wow. I said, I think we should jump on that right now. I was like, Scott Drew has talked about winning the Big 12 tournament forever, and he hasn't been able to do it. Like, they've won regular season Big 12 titles, but they haven't won the tournament since he's been there. It was something that Adam Flagler really wanted to do last year. It was one of the seniors' goals. So I still think it's important to the veteran guys like Jalen Bridgers and JTT, even though JTT is kind of hurt, but it's something that these guys want to do. I know it's very important to Drew, and man, you see him get down in the first half, and the adjustments that Drew makes are ridiculous. He's such a good coach that they're never out of a game. And I like to say this about the 3-point shot. It's like putting makeup on a pimply face. It could cover up a lot of other things that you do bad. And so it doesn't matter that Baylor's not elite on defense. They're just never out of a game. And I think 8-1 is a little much there. I think that there should be more 4-1, 5-1. I think with, maybe even like Trigg said, since he beats Kansas, I don't think that's too crazy to say. I don't think that Kansas is really going to give a damn about this. I don't think Dickinson and McCullough is going to play. Self just wants to get somehow healthy and get on to the big tournament. Texas and Baylor is going to be a great game. And man, how motivated Sampson's team is going to be here when they have a one locked up here. I think Baylor at 8-1 is great odds.
I would agree. I also, as we said in the beginning of this video, bet Baylor. But I think another team that could probably surprise a lot of people, Texas Tech Red Raiders here, great on both sides of the ball, right? Not as good a defense as they are offense. They play a little slower, a little bit more methodical. But Trigg, they do what I love. They make their free throws. And this is why I bet on this team on Saturday. I like how consistent they are. I generally know what I'm going to get for them. Yes, there was a couple of stretches there where they lost to, TCU, Cincinnati, Baylor, and then Iowa State, UCF, and Texas. But I think this team has been playing really solid basketball in the month of March, and I think they can continue to do so. As we mentioned, they have 2 byes here, and then probably going to play BYU. Probably, let's just say, depending on Houston's motivation factor, going to face Houston in the semifinals.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind them in a matchup with Houston. Like I said, I think someone's going to get Houston. I think BYU might get them if they got to play again. So you got to remember, this was a game that was in Lubbock earlier this year, BYU, Texas Tech, and BYU led that game 48-32 at halftime. Texas Tech came roaring back to somehow outscore BYU 53-30 in the second half and win. If those two teams end up playing each other, which I think they probably will, I think I would maybe lean toward BYU to get it done in like the rematch. But again, like I can't fault you for wanting to take a shot with Texas Tech or basically anyone that's playing Houston, because I do think Houston's going to slip up at some point. The computers have loved BYU all year. I think they were a 2-point favorite, a 2-point underdog, maybe a 2.5-point underdog at home to Houston. If they end up getting by Texas Tech and they're in the semi, maybe they're like only +5. I don't, the other thing too, if you want to talk about motivation and caring about this tournament, like I could see BYU really caring about this tournament. It's like the first year in their Big 12. I think they've got some motivation to win here, maybe more so than a team like Houston, who just won a Big 12 regular season title and sort of has that like expectation of greatness. You have to remember, BYU was always second fiddle to Gonzaga and St. Mary's in that WCC the past few years. So I could see them wanting to win something. I don't hate BYU from a making a run standpoint here, but I also don't disagree with CT. I think there's some value with Baylor, and to his point, their defense has improved. They're not as bad as last year. They're not great, but they've definitely improved, and I think that's also worth something in this tournament.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. We're going to talk. We talked enough about futures bets. I need to know who you guys think is going to be in the finals. CT, let's hear it.
I'm going to go Baylor versus BYU. I think BYU, I think Trigg just made a really good point. I think they're going to be very motivated, and with their 3-point shooting, and they got the big man too, Khalifa, who at times I've wanted to strangle this year on the floor. But man, he makes the other teams pretty frustrated. So I'm going Baylor versus BYU. Baylor to get the job done, and honestly, it's really not a homer play. I couldn't believe they were 8-1, and I know how important this is to Scott Drew and company to get it done. So I can't pass that up.
Yeah, I had them, if you remember last year, to win the Big 12 with you. And so we know how my futures bets go. Teams do very well the following year. That means next year you guys should bet on the Baltimore Ravens to win it all. Adam Trigger, give me your finals Big 12 conference. Well, let's see who's in it.
I can't believe. Can I agree with him and just take the other side? I'm going to go BYU Baylor with BYU winning it, because we can't have the same thing. But I mean, just looking at the bracket and looking at the teams I want to eliminate, and then thinking that Cincinnati could potentially upset Kansas. There's no way I want to play against Baylor. I already told you I really don't like Iowa State. I don't think that I just don't like the fact that they're going to need to lean on defense for 3 games. And similar to Houston, I want to play against Houston. So those are the 2 teams I think have the most upside. I mean, honestly, if we're talking about, like playing 2 futures, why not just play BYU and Baylor? I mean, if you get there with
Makes
one,
sense.
You're there with a pretty good price. So
yeah,
that's kind of how I'm seeing it. I think those 2 teams have the most upside and the most like ability to get hot and make a run.
BYU 12-1, Baylor 7-1 pretty much is the current consensus. I'll join you too. I'll join you guys. Something fun to cheer for, and maybe my Wildcats can win a couple games and somehow sneak into March Madness. But I'm not holding my breath. I will try to attend a NIT game in Manhattan. Thank you to Chris Thurston. Thank you to Adam Trigger. Make sure you guys head over to wagertalk.com where you guys can get all of Trigg's plays, wt.buzz/AT.